Welcome to The Explainer. How does a country, in less than 100 years, go from a united revolution against a king to a brutal, bloody war against itself? Today, we're going to unpack one of the most tragic and pivotal moments in American history, the Civil War. We'll explore the deep, deep divisions that literally tore the United States in two.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. By the 1850s, you really had two different Americas sharing a border. In the North, you've got this booming industrial economy with factories and railroads popping up everywhere, all powered by immigrant labor. But in the South, well, their entire world, their whole economic system, was built on one thing: King Cotton, and the brutal institution of slavery that propped it all up. These weren't just small differences, they were completely opposed ways of life.
So how in the world did it go from just deep division to an all-out war? Well, here's our roadmap. We're going to look at the core conflict, then the string of failed compromises, the absolute point of no return, how the Union itself just dissolved, the war itself, and finally, the lasting legacy it left behind.
All right, first up, let's really dig into this core conflict. The North's economy was industrializing, and fast. Millions of European immigrants were pouring in, looking for work in these new, growing cities. The South's wealth, on the other hand, was tied almost completely to the land, specifically cotton, and the labor of 4 million enslaved human beings.
Now, what's so fascinating here is how clearly this chart shows two totally different paths. Just look at the infrastructure line. The North is building this dense web of railroads connecting all its cities and factories. But in the South, the railroads were mostly just short lines built for one purpose and one purpose only: get cotton to the nearest port. You've got one nation racing towards a modern industrial future, while the other was digging its heels in, doubling down on an old system that was completely inseparable from slavery.
So, as the nation starts expanding westward, one single question comes to dominate every single political debate: will slavery expand with it? For decades, Congress just kept trying to patch things up, to find some compromise that would keep the peace. But it was like kicking a can down a road that was already on fire. Each attempt just seemed to make things worse.
And right here is a crucial concept: popular sovereignty. Now, on the surface, it sounds great, right? Super democratic. Let the people in the new territories decide for themselves. But in reality, it was a political powder keg. It turned every new territory into a battleground, a prize to be won by whichever side could rush more settlers in first.
And this slide just perfectly shows the direct result. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 basically threw out all the old compromises that had limited slavery's spread and applied popular sovereignty to Kansas. The results? Total chaos. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups flooded into the territory, leading to voter fraud, intimidation, and eventually straight-up guerrilla warfare. They called it Bleeding Kansas for a reason. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a mini-civil war.
By the late 1850s, the whole political system was just breaking down. You have three major events happen in just a few years that completely shatter any last hope of a peaceful way out of this. They radicalized both sides and made the conflict feel, well, not just possible, but completely inevitable.
So in 1857, a desperate and divided nation looked to its highest court for an answer. The case of an enslaved man, Dred Scott, who had sued for his freedom, finally reached the Supreme Court. A lot of people were hoping, praying really, that this would be it, a final legal ruling that would settle the question that was tearing the country apart.
The court's answer was a bombshell. The Dred Scott decision didn't just rule against him, it declared that African Americans weren't citizens and had no rights at all. It said Congress had zero power to stop slavery's expansion. For the South, it was a home run, a total victory. But for the North, it was terrifying proof that a slave power conspiracy had taken over the government. And man, did it galvanize the brand new anti-slavery Republican Party.
And this whole idea was captured perfectly by a rising star from Illinois, a guy named Abraham Lincoln. During his famous debates, he laid it out plain and simple: a house divided against itself cannot stand. He argued the nation couldn't keep going down this fractured path. It had to become all one thing or all the other.
Then came the final shock to the system. In 1859, a radical abolitionist named John Brown led a raid on a federal armory at Harper's Ferry, hoping to start a massive slave rebellion. The raid itself failed, but its impact was enormous. In the North, many saw him as a martyr for a righteous cause, but in the South, he was a terrorist, confirming their absolute worst fears that the North would use violence to destroy their entire way of life. Any middle ground that was left? Poof,
it was gone. With the nation at a fever pitch, the 1860 presidential election was destined to be the final trigger. This wasn't just another election. It was basically a referendum on whether the United States would even continue to exist.
The Democratic Party, which had been this national institution, just couldn't hold itself together. It completely fractured over the issue of slavery and ran two different candidates, one for the North, one for the South. This split the vote and paved the way for the Republican, Abraham Lincoln, to win the presidency with less than 40% of the popular vote. And here's the kicker. His name wasn't even on the ballot in 10 southern states. He won without a single one.
For the Deep South, Lincoln's election was it, the point of no return. They saw it as absolute proof that they'd lost all political power in the Union, and they didn't wait around. Led by South Carolina, 7 states announced they were leaving. They seceded before Lincoln was even inaugurated and formed their own new nation, the Confederate States of America.
In the early morning hours of April 12, 1861, the talking finally stopped. Confederate forces opened fire on the U.S. Army at Fort Sumter. The war was on. Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion, and that single act forced the states in the Upper South to finally pick a side. 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, chose to secede and join the Confederacy. Now, on paper, the Union's advantages look completely overwhelming. I mean, more people, more factories, more railroads, an established navy, the list goes on. But the Confederacy had its own strengths. They were fighting a defensive war on their home turf, they had a vast territory to hide in, and, at least early on, they had better military leadership. The South didn't have to conquer the North, they just had to hang on long enough to make the North quit.
The fighting that followed was on a scale nobody in America had ever seen before. It was a brutal, bloody clash of modern industrial weapons and outdated battlefield tactics. And the human cost, it's just staggering. While it was devastating for the North, it was catastrophic for the South. A mind-blowing 18% of its military-age white men, that's nearly 1 out of every 5, was killed in the war. The total death toll is estimated to be around 620,000 soldiers, and some historians think it might be even higher than that. To really put that into perspective for you, that is more American military deaths than in World War I and World War II combined. This was a war that pitted countrymen, neighbors, and sometimes even brothers against each other for 4 long, horrific years.
After 4 years of that brutal conflict, the Union's massive advantages in men and manufacturing finally proved to be too much. Key turning points, like the huge victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, followed by General Sherman's destructive march to the sea, just broke the Confederacy's will and ability to keep fighting. In April of 1865, it was over. The war settled 2 fundamental questions that had haunted the United States since its very beginning. First, America was one indivisible nation, not just a club of states that could leave when they wanted. And second, the institution of slavery was finally, and forever, destroyed. But this all came at a cost that is almost impossible to imagine, leaving the South's economy in absolute ruins and the entire country scarred by hatred and loss. Hey, if this explainer helps you get a better handle on this incredibly complex time, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you want to see what happened right after the war, during the difficult and really controversial period of Reconstruction, you should definitely check out the next explainer in our U.S. history series.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. The Civil War answered the question of whether America would be one nation, but the struggle to truly define what that nation stands for and to heal the deep, deep wounds it exposed, well, you could argue that's a struggle that continues to this day. Thanks for watching.